How many people here buy cryptocurrencies? All right. How many people here have their favorite exchanges? For someone new to the world of cryptocurrencies, deciding what to buy, and especially where to buy it, can be both exciting but overwhelming. You must decode the complexities of the technologies and the currencies behind them and get to grips with the difficulties associated with trading and monitoring them. To explore the rise of the cryptocurrency exchanges, please welcome to the stage in conversation with CoinDesk's Noelle, Acheson, the Chief Growth Officer of the largest cryptocurrency exchange in the world, Binance, Ted Lin, and the co-founder and CEO of Quoine, Mike Kayamori.
Joining us in this deep dive into the fast-paced world of cryptocurrency exchanges. Even with the Bitcoin price trading relatively flat for the past few months, it has not been boring. And we're joined today by two experts who I'm sure would agree to that because they live it every day. We're joined by Ted Lin, who's the Chief Growth Officer of Binance, and Mike Kayamori, the CEO and founder of Quoine. Right. Mike, Quoine is labeled a fintech company rather than exchange. Talk us through that.
Well, we aspire to be a fintech company, right? We believe the blockchain has an opportunity to disrupt many industries, and even within finance, a lot of verticals within that. But our core is an exchange.
You recently launched a service called Liquid, which provides liquidity, as its name implies. How does it do that?
Yeah, so we started Quoine 4.5 years ago. And at that time, it was only Bitcoin. So now there's 2,000, even close to 3,000 tokens out there. But when we started, it was essentially Bitcoin. Ethereum was still not around, right? So when it was only Bitcoin, it was okay. Everybody wanted to trade Bitcoin and fiat. But once there was more tokens, more cryptocurrencies, then there needed to be liquidity. So we work with global exchanges, also internally. For example, if you want to buy Bitcoin with Japanese yen or US dollars, we match it. So we call that a liquidity pool, a world book, and that's how our service is called Liquid.
So it's a network of exchanges rather than exchange itself.
Both internally and externally.
And it'll use Quoine among many others.
Yes.
Yeah? Ted, Binance is a fascinating story, coming from virtually nowhere last year to be the biggest exchange in the world. How did that happen?
Well, we're always asking ourselves the same question. Because to replicate the same rate of acceleration and growth, we do have to look at what we did well and what we need to try further. And I think it was a natural result of hard work, great user support, and pretty much good luck. So we started out of this ICO back in 2017, and our goal was pretty much to build a better crypto exchange. And out of that experience, we felt that authenticity, integrity, security, performance platform, and absolute transparency really helped. So along the way, we garnered more and more user support to the extent that we became #1 in terms of trading volume. And to date, we are still the most popular in terms of trading volume out of all the crypto exchanges. But we have evolved a lot further since. We have added Binance Labs, that's an incubator for crypto and blockchain projects. We have launched a launchpad, that's for initial token offerings. We have Binance Info, that's for looking up information about projects. We also have Binance Academy, that's teaching about cryptocurrency and blockchain education. We also launched our charity initiative, that's the BCF. And today, we're going to launch Binance Research, an in-depth research service that provides analysis, in-depth analysis that is democratized to everybody instead of just the heavy institutional or large clients. I think it's going to complete the ecosystem even further.
We're seeing a fascinating evolution of the business model of an exchange. I mean, this is not what we're used to in the traditional world. What does, Mike, maybe want to speak to that. Why does crypto lend itself to such creative business models in the infrastructure sector?
So your question was, why does crypto?
Yeah, why are the crypto exchanges so different from, say, an FX exchange?
Well, that's yes and no, right? I think in terms of cryptocurrency, you can define it in many ways. Is it a store of value? Is it a medium of exchange, right? Is it a digital gold? Is it a currency? From that perspective, and when you look at the token economy where there's hundreds and thousands of tokens, whether if it's a protocol or a certain vertical, there's so many out there, right? And say 2 years ago, ICO didn't exist. Now they're talking about security tokens and STOs. In another 2 years, there's going to be new things coming up.
So you have to evolve fast.
You have to be agile, you have to be flexible, but in a regulated way.
Speaking of evolving quickly or adapting quickly, Binance started out, correct me if I'm wrong, as a crypto-to-crypto exchange. Is that right?
Yes.
And how, first of all, why? And secondly, how does that affect your business model?
Sure. I think everybody agrees that when you touch fiat currency in your exchange, it adds a layer of complication. Probably not just a layer, but multitudes of layers of complication. Whenever you touch a fiat currency, it essentially entangles with certain government-issued legal tenders. There are regulations that sometimes are for the protective good of the users, but sometimes adds a layer that actually stifles innovation. So when we started, we really wanted to go at it and present the best matching engine, the best performing crypto exchange experience without needing to worry about the different regulations that takes a long time, maybe over the years of application before we can get to action. So that decision allowed us to deploy our MVP a lot sooner, allow us to interact with the users a lot sooner, and allow us to understand what are the existing obstacles or hindrance or the inconvenience of a crypto-to-crypto exchange. So that was a design decision, really, but allows us to deploy much faster and scale much faster before we had to come to the regulatory side of the question we need to research into.
Tying into the agility that we were talking about before.
Absolutely.
Binance started in China, is that right?
I'm sorry?
Did you start in China?
We did have a team in China at first, but we were never registered in China to start off with.
Okay, interesting. Where are you based now?
We're based all over the place. I myself am based in Taiwan, and we have people from 39 different countries around the world. And it's a design that we chose, because either you're close to the market or you're close to each other. And we chose the former because we wanted to get to know more people, be closer to the users. So that's why we actually have a completely decentralized. People keep wondering, like, how do you operate? And the thing is, we do a lot of instant messaging, we do a lot of Zoom sessions, we do a lot of Skype. We actually do not use much email internally because that slows things down. But when you go from a centralized organization to a decentralized setup, it introduces a lot of different chemistry. And I think there's always room to optimize that, but we do feel that being close to market has great advantages as we are learning organization how to serve the users better.
And speaks to the agility. Mike, you're based in Japan, right? And the FSA is known as one of the most forward-thinking regulators in the space. In fact, you're regulated by the FSA, aren't you? How has that helped you, or do you see it as a hindrance?
You know, that's a great question. I think from a regulator perspective, there's essentially two things they really care. One is to protect the casual retail investor, right? So they're not worried about sophisticated investors, traders, accredited investors, institutional investors. They're not worried about them. They're worried about the average investor, retail investor. The second point that they're really concerned of is money laundering, right? So knowing your customer, anti-money laundering, counter-financing of terrorism. These two, as long as you touch, whether if it's crypto or any financial services, you can't get away with. And especially when an exchange grows, and we had at our peak over $1 billion of customers' assets. And the Japanese regulators will tell us, you're bigger than some small banks. You're bigger than some brokerage, like most of the brokerage firms. So it needs to come under regulation. So from our perspective, it wasn't an option. When we started, there was no crypto. It was only Bitcoin. So if you wanted to trade Bitcoin, you were going to trade with US dollars or Japanese yen or Singapore dollars or any national fiat. So you had to have a bank account. You had to have the blessing of existing financial institutions such as banks that will take on customers' fiat. So from that perspective, from day one, we had to work with regulators. And we moved our headquarters specifically to Japan because Japan was the largest potential market in terms of cryptocurrency and fiat trading.
Ted, what's your view on the role of regulation? Do you think it can help or hinder more?
I think in the short term, it may hinder the speed of innovation. Because there's always rules in place, you have to apply, you have to be audited. But I do believe it's a necessary thing. Because in the long run, for it to be a pivotal technology, for crypto to be commonplace, regulation is necessary evil. The necessary part that can, to a certain extent, protect the users. Many of the users are still curious. They are actually afraid about crypto because there is no clear regulation in place in many of the jurisdictions around the world. And they're thinking, if I actually get into this, I start investing in crypto, if I start getting paid in crypto, I start consuming or start living on crypto, who's going to look out for me when my crypto gets stolen? Who's going to look out for me when there's volatility in a particular cryptocurrency I hold? So these are the basic questions that maybe people who have been in the crypto industry for a while are quite used to because we're quite comfortable with the different risks. But for the rest of the world, in fact, as I was walking around Web Summit these past few days, I realized a different experience from going to crypto conference or blockchain conference versus such a general technical or startup conference is that not too many people are into crypto yet. So it's great because it's got a big market. But on the other hand, we need regulations to appease people's concerns. So in the short term, yes, will be a little bit inconvenient as people ramp up and they need to apply. So innovation may take a little more time necessary, but for ultimate proliferation adoption, regulation is a definite must.
Mike, do you think it's possible that we would one day have global regulation for these global assets that we're now handling?
Well, it's happening already, right? So we're regulated in Japan with the Japan FSA, which is the regulatory body. When we talked to them, they said they just had a meeting with the Singapore MAS,
Really?
right? So all these governments and regulators, they all talk to each other now. They believe that there needs to be a cohesive framework and guideline around that. At the same time, there's these international organizations like the FATF. So we just had a meeting with IMF, right? IMF was interested in how cryptocurrency was potentially impacting the monetary, global monetary part. And they were, again, the commonality among all these people is all around customer protection and money laundering. So that is part of a financial hygiene that we have to work with. And unfortunately, I probably spend 60–70% of my time on regulation, compliance, external audit, all of these things. But I think it's part of this industry growing up and becoming mainstream, because that's the only way institutions and like credible people come in to trade.
And how much of your time is spent educating the regulators? This must be something very hard for them to understand because it's an investment asset, but it's also something that we can use. How do you see them getting their head around this?
So the interesting thing is the Japanese government first passed the bill 2 years ago. So they were on the forefront of regulation. And it takes about 5 to 6 months to draft the bill and pass the parliament. And then it's another year when it gets implemented. So that was 2017, April. And we've been talking to regulators for, specifically the Japanese regulators, for about 2.5 years. And they've come a long way as well. So initially, they didn't know what a hard fork was, right? So they didn't know how these wallets were different and how to even look at it. Their knowledge base is unbelievable now because they regulate all crypto exchanges in Japan and they inspect everybody. So their knowledge is probably more than any single exchange because they're able to look at all these different exchanges and know which exchange does what kind of wallet management. So from that perspective, they're way ahead now.
I can imagine that, but then again, they're focusing on Japan, whereas this is a global asset in different needs in different areas. Binance is present pretty much all over the world. You launched in Uganda recently. What do you see as the different geographical needs for cryptocurrencies? How can that influence regulation?
Sure. I think a lot of the people think cryptocurrency follows the steps of fiat. Some think it's a natural next step evolution for payment technology, for vehicles of holding value, transfer value. But it is essentially a new technology that can completely skip any existing incumbent network or technology. In Africa, where less than 20% are banked, I think it's a technology that can skip, for example, like how PC or the mobile broadband can be skipped to the next type of generation of technology. It can actually help people without so much incumbent infrastructure deployment. So no matter if it's the time of deployment, the cost of total deployment, those can be skipped. And cryptocurrency, in a way, can actually help more people faster in places where there's little or less financial infrastructure. So the necessary regulation to help a local population is different from one jurisdiction to the next. So it really depends on what the people need. But I do like to say, whichever regulator to come up with the framework, it is best to have a very clear framework instead of an ambiguous or semi-finished framework, because the latter is going to even prolong the process a lot longer than necessary. So a clear, concise, hopefully, and precise framework will help everybody, ourselves, Mike, everybody in the crowd, and everybody who's looking forward to the adoption of crypto.
Do you see that happening anytime soon?
Absolutely not, for the whole world at a time. But I do see that as soon as one jurisdiction, one regulator takes advantage of that, and the adoption increases, others will follow.
Has that happened in Japan? The regulation has increased adoption or interest in cryptocurrencies?
So I agree with Ted that legislation is always a step behind because they cannot look at the future and anticipate and draw up guidelines or legislation. So there will always be a step behind. So they won't go into any detail on what a crypto exchange can do or not do. They will draw lines which are basic. So what happens is then they work with SROs, self-regulating organizations that work hand in hand with governments.
And you're part of the Japanese
We are one of the founding exchanges of the Japan Virtual Currency Exchange Association. For example, what they do is the government will say, these basic things are the rules, and they're quite comprehensive, but they will not regulate your leverage trading needs to be under 5x or 25x, or the way you segregate your customers' assets need to be this way. All of those details will be the responsibility of the SRO. So with the government and then these self-regulating organization working hand in hand, that's when it becomes comprehensive.
Okay, that's an interesting model for other jurisdictions to follow. Ted, what do you think it will take to get cryptocurrency mainstream?
You mean how long it would take to increase the adoption?
Yes. And by what do we even mean by mainstream, in your opinion?
Well, I think if everyone knows somebody who uses crypto or invests in crypto, that's a start. But I don't think it's there right now. We are working very hard to push that up because we do believe the absolute benefit it can bring compared to the traditional money system of fiat. So hopefully that will be soon.
Okay, well, hopefully this time next year we'll be sitting here talking about the next set of problems since we've overcome the first set of hurdles, and hopefully this time next year, all of you will have, of course, a cryptocurrency wallet in your phones. I'd like to thank very much our panelists for joining us today. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day.